Scotland's history matters to Alex Salmond and features in his argument for independence. Here in Edinburgh, in the late 1990s, a creaking sound echoed through the streets, heralding that Scotland's Parliament was rising from its grave.
Good evening!
Good evening!
Yes, good evening. Welcome to the Wycherley Murder and Mystery Tour. Now, my name is Adam Lyle, deceased.
Walking these streets, you get a feel for the Scottish capital's long and colourful past. Was it a sense of history which prompted Alex Salmond to join Labour and the Liberal Democrats to campaign for a yes vote in the devolution referendum? They walked together towards the historic election of 1999, which would bring the Parliament back to life. But the goodwill forged during the long referendum campaign would not last.
Thank you all very much, and good night. Thank you.
In an often bad-tempered campaign, Alex Salmond, as a potential First Minister, was put under more intense scrutiny than ever before. His poll ratings slid, and his Penny for Scotland policy, a promise to use the income tax-raising power of the new Parliament, didn't go down well with voters or some in his own party. What went wrong?
I don't know that anything went wrong. I think they got what they deserved.
Well, you were pretty critical at the time.
No, I offered helpful comments, which were always interpreted as being just straight criticism.
Can you remind us of the helpful comments?
Oh, I can't remember what I said now, but it will be true, I'm sure.
Well, what about a penny for Scotland?
Oh, that was nonsense. That was absolute nonsense, and I said so.
That's a helpful comment.
Well, they dropped it. They dropped the Penny for Scotland thing because I was right. I don't want to dwell on anything like that. Some of the SNP may want to, but I think most of them don't. I think most of them want to forget that embarrassment.
It would be a hard lesson. You don't see the Alex Salmond of today giving such hostages to fortune.
I think the problem with Penny for Scotland was the party talked a great deal about how it raised the money, not how it spent it. And I think that's something that sometimes happens when you talk about taxation. I think we needed a much greater focus in 1999 about what that money would buy. So I think that's a collective issue. And indeed, I was deeply involved in the Penny for Scotland issue. I think recognising now what happened, I think that's probably a critique I would make.
And then there were Alex Salmond's comments on the NATO bombing of Serbia.
It is an action of dubious legality, but above all one of unpardonable folly.
One of the SNP candidates for that parliament was Duncan Hamilton, a rising star who was close to the leader.
I suspect for Alec the criticism that he got over Kosovo might be a low point. And I say that not because he thinks for a minute that he was wrong about that, but because it unleashed in the middle of an election campaign something that was able to be twisted and turned against the SNP, and turned it in the middle of the campaign into a real problem. And I think it may well be that he looks back on that and thinks that whilst he may have been right, then saying it at that time may or may not have been the wisest move. But that's my guess.
Alex Salmond's outburst may have been politically costly. Had this man, often criticised for over-calculating his positions, simply exposed a powerful inner conviction whose authenticity has since proved attractive.
Kosovo, you've got to remember, Alec believes and feels things very passionately. He believed utterly that this was wrong, it was adventurism. He spoke, I would think, for the whole SNP in that. And I would much, much, much rather be in a party with a leader that does that than a leader who is mealy-mouthed when it comes to issues of real principle.
But in that first election to the Scottish Parliament, the SNP came a poor second, with 35 MSPs, 21 fewer than Labour. Alex Salmond, as leader, carried the responsibility. The election of 1999 was a disappointing result. Would you accept that?
I think it was less than we had hoped for, but more than we might have anticipated even 2 or 3 years earlier. I think expectations were perhaps very unrealistic. We had a lot still to do in 1999, although we had done a lot.
After nearly 300 years, Scotland once more had a parliament. Yet even as one of its champions, Alex Salmond was evidently burdened with disappointment, even self-doubt. Having played a key role in the successful campaign for a yes vote on devolution, Alex Salmond was elected to the first Scottish Parliament of modern times that sat here in the Assembly Hall of the Church of Scotland. But surprisingly, he didn't shine in the new role, and within a year, he was under fierce attack from hostile media.
He probably struggled to adapt from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament initially. Much was written at the time about him failing to score points at First Minister's question in opposition. I don't think that's particularly fair, because I think that the Scottish Parliament is not really set up for opposition parties. But Alec is a Westminster politician. He loves the clash and clamour. He loves the sort of the cut and thrust across the debating chamber. And to be brought into an environment which is all about consensus, cuddly politics, I think for him was not necessarily a natural transition.
Just 1 year into the new Parliament, Alex Salmond brought his decade-long leadership of the party to an abrupt end.
I have invested a great deal of time, particularly over the last year, in developing the position of the SNP as a strong team of people who are capable of taking Scotland forward. And I think after 10 years, it's time to allow someone in that team of people, that strong team that we've seen developing in the Scots Parliament, the chance to show what they can do.
11 years later, and here's the same man attempting to win an unprecedented second term as First Minister. How can such success and self-confidence have returned to a man who a decade ago was dubbed by some a quitter? While he was on the campaign trail, I asked him why he threw in the towel back in 2000.
I'd done 10 years, and that's quite interesting. I came to believe that, because I could understand why we were getting such bad press. You know, we were ahead in the polls and we were doing all right, and yet we were getting absolutely lumps knocked out of us, and I couldn't recognise what was actually happening in the Parliament with the description of it. And I got into my head that the problem had become me. You know, the press, because I'd had 10 years, basically a charmed existence. You know, nobody laid a finger on me, and I began to believe that, well, basically they've got fed up with having me as they're talking about the press as opposed to the people. And basically the party would do better if somebody had a fresh start and a decent run at it.
Over the next few years, he steered his career in a different direction and regained his fighting spirit. He left the Scottish Parliament and led his party at Westminster. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq aroused his passionate opposition. He was prominent on the UK national stage, making an increasingly popular case.
A month ago, he said the only circumstances he would go to war without a second resolution were if the inspectors concluded there was no more progress, which they haven't, if there was a majority in the Security Council, which there's not, and there was an unreasonable veto from one country. There are 3 countries of his permanent members opposed to the Prime Minister's policy. When did he change his position, and why?
Apparently, the aggression of Westminster suited Alex Salmond better than the rainbow politics of Edinburgh. Or perhaps it had simply revived him. When John Swinney stepped down as leader, the heavens seemed to send Alex Salmond a sign. The SNP leader likes Indian food a lot. This restaurant is said to be his favourite haunt. And one of those who whetted his appetite for a return to Edinburgh says that curry was part of the mix. In 2004, when Alex Salmond has been out of the leadership for 4 years, you, amongst others, encouraged him to come back, I think with a series of curry dinners. Why did you think he should return?
The choice of what was next was quite a difficult one. They had 3 very, very strong candidates, but there was no really emerging new leadership figure or agenda at the time. And so it just struck a few of us that there was an opportunity here not to be missed, that Alec would be able to galvanise what was clearly emerging as a big opportunity to replace Labour in government. I was spending a lot of time in London. Myself, Angus Robertson, who's now the SNP's Westminster leader. Spent a lot of time in one of Alex's favourite Pimlico curry houses, basically ruminating on the problem and what could be done about it. And I can't quite remember the full detail, but I do recall that by the end of it he had determined that this could be put together and a case for returning could be made, so he was up for it.
Was it vanity that prompted his comeback? A belief that he was indispensable? Or did he feel the call of duty, believing that if he did not step up, the party would take a wrong turn?
In a sense, he had to be persuaded to come back, but it was more a sense of obligation and duty, if truth be told, than it was anything to do with ego. I often laugh when people say he just couldn't bear to be out the limelight and he desperately pushed these people aside to come back. It's not how it was. It simply wasn't how it was, and that's to misunderstand both the moment and the man.
So your voice was one of those that was whispering, return.
Well, I mean, I'm a fan of his in the sense of I think he adds something to the party that the party doesn't otherwise have, and I think at that time, given where the party could have gone, it was important that he did come back. So I think there was a danger. I mean, I don't remember being somebody who was so utterly convinced that he must come back at all costs.
In order to come back, Alex Salmond had to muster all of the flexibility, or perhaps rubberiness, that good political leaders possess.
If nominated, I'll decline. If drafted, I'll defer. And if elected, I'll resign. So it is then with a degree of surprise and humility, but with a renewed determination, that I must tell you that I am a candidate for the leadership of the Scottish National Party.
And the man who had once ascended from party exile to party leader pulled off another remarkable resurrection.
Alex Salmond MP, 4,952 votes, or 75.76% of the vote.
Nicola and I intend to win the 2007 elections in Scotland, and we'll do that by offering a vision to the people where currently there's just a vacuum. And we intend to lead a government of purpose and direction so that we can offer the people of this nation the opportunity to move forward to independence, democracy and equality.